if you take a hypothesis robust enough to explain something like Catholicism, and you say, well, Google has a lot of the properties of, a collective that engages, of a congregation, right? And it does. Indeed, it has many of those properties, but it doesn't have all of them. And what you will see is that they behave differently over time, precisely because of this issue about the individual who behaves selfishly in a group, profiting at the expense of the group. Mm-hmm. Right? So ultimately, you would expect things like Google to fail to function in a coherent fashion. And in fact, I would argue we are seeing that. We are seeing the incentives of the individuals who decide what Google does betraying Google, right? They are actually hobbling the entity to enrich themselves, which is exactly what you would expect. And you don't see that in an ancient religion. You may see it in a cult or something that has just emerged, but something that has stood the test of time will have stood the test of time because it has structures in it that prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Well, the way that I like to talk about that is that it has to do with purpose. Like, this is difficult because obviously purpose is difficult in terms of directed action, maybe is the best way to, like a way to use a word that's more scientifically appropriate. And so depending on the directed action, it will also affect the structures that will set themselves up, in the way what's going to happen in that group. And so one of the things that religion has done, or different religions, is to try to identify the highest direction for action. And so in terms of Christianity, the high or point of attention, we can use the word point of attention because attention is what directs action. And so in Christianity, the highest point of attention is something like the infinite source of the world, which is also love. And so that is our point of attention. And so we bind ourselves together in the direction towards that point. So what will happen is sometimes parasitical systems will set themselves up. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. But because the point of attention is something like the infinite source of the world and that it is bound in love, then there'll be self repairing mechanisms, which will also be part of that group, because at some point there'll be a judgment, right? You'll notice that the leader is not in line with what the group is supposed to be. And so there'll be some mechanism to eliminate the parasite. But in Google, there's none of that. Like in these massive corporations, it's only to make money. It's only to grow your riches. And so you don't have those mechanisms set up.
Well, but so my point is there's a reason you don't have those mechanisms set up, and it's because evolution does not favor their emergence in the context of Google, whereas it does in the context of a religion, or like a more coherent religion, let's say. Right. And so what I really hope that you will be able to hear from me is that actually an evolutionary perspective, and I know you take evolution seriously. I've heard talks with other people that you've done in which you raise the issue yourself. So I know you're aware of its relevance. But my point to you would be a proper evolutionary understanding of religious phenomena not only explains the nature of religions, things like mechanisms that frustrate individual profit at the expense of the collective, right? Those are adaptive. But it also predicts the failure of religions that do not successfully do this, and it predicts the divergence of religions. Right? So what I'm arguing is it's possible to overdraw this. If you simply say, oh, religions are like species, right? And, there's a speciation event at which, Christians depart from Jews, and another one at which Protestants depart from Catholics. That's true at one level. It is not perfectly analogous to genetic speciation. But that if one follows the logic carefully, there is actually a toolkit that predicts all of these events and describes why some work better than others. That effectively, understanding what job is being accomplished by these structures tells you how they are likely to behave, in the same way that looking at organisms and understanding their ecology predicts how they will respond to certain kinds of change.
And when you use the word better, what is it that you're referring to?
Well, I would say that evolution, if we do the work properly, what Darwinian evolution favors is lodging a particular set of genes, and I know that word will show up strangely here, but I will defend it if need be, lodging a particular set of genetic spellings as deeply into the future as possible. In other words, what selection favors is the persistence of genetic spellings, and that the measure of it is how, the duration of that persistence. Ideally, selection would favor indefinite persistence. Indefinite persistence is an unattainable, and so it basically shapes things like creatures and things like lineages such that they become durable.